So the Barbie movie came out in July of this year and crushed it at the box office, ranking it over $1 billion. Ryan Gosling's performance as Ken ended up being a surprising standout, and despite more or less being the antagonist of the movie, many found him endearing. This sparked Ryan Gosling to make multiple statements about the character, like in this interview with Variety, where he says up until 6 months ago, the world didn't care about Ken. He was just a 70-year-old crotchless doll with no house, no car, no job, no voice, and look at him now. He has a Grammy-nominated power ballad and the voice of an angel, which is very self-aggrandizing. He basically said this character, who has existed long before he was born, never mattered until he got his hands on him, along with saying that he has the voice of an angel. Way to be modest, Gosling. But it got me thinking about Ken. I question if he's really as irrelevant as they claim he was. Ken was first introduced in 1961, and he was the second character to be introduced into the franchise. When Barbie was first introduced, her character was purposely left kind of vague, because Ruth Handler wanted children to project themselves onto her and see themselves as something they could be when they eventually grew up, so the child could take the toy and imagine themselves as a teenage fashion model or an astronaut or whatever Barbie happened to be in that case. But the thing is, kids like character, so they started asking her a bunch of questions about who Barbie was. They also really wanted her to have a boyfriend, flooding Mattel with letters about it. So the handlers did expand a bit on her character, and created Ken to satisfy that demand. Ken was named after the handler's son, Kenneth Handler, which in my opinion is a little weird, considering the fact that the dolls are supposed to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and Barbie was named after Barbara Handler. It just seems a little awkward to name them after their children when the dolls are supposed to be dating. Regardless, that's what they went with. Okay, let's get the crotch thing out of the way early. So for decades, a lot of people, typically adults who just have to ruin everything, have been obsessing over Ken's crotch, pretty much insisting that this 11-inch plastic toy for little girls is somehow less of a man for not being anatomically correct. Yeah, it's pretty weird. This was an issue for Mattel during Ken's development though. There was a lot of internal discourse about how to go about making a male doll when it came to his male anatomy. There were some in the company that wanted him to be anatomically correct, while there were others who wanted the opposite extreme. Ruth herself, the woman who fought so hard to give Barbie breasts, was pretty adamant that he needed some kind of genitalia, but there were some men in the company that found it very uncomfortable, so they made 3 drafts of what they could possibly go with. One that was anatomically correct, one where he was wearing sculpted on shorts that had a bulge, and one where he was totally smooth. They consulted with a child psychologist, who believed that having an anatomically correct doll for children would have been inappropriate, and probably unsafe, which I personally agree with. So they actually decided to go with the second option, where it was implied. There were those at the company who were displeased with this though, like Charlotte Johnson, one of the clothing designers for Barbie, claiming that children would most likely scratch off the paint to try to see what's under it, which I don't agree with. Many dolls today come with painted on underwear, and it's not typical for kids to scrape the paint off. I'm not really sure where that idea would come from, however it didn't really matter in the end. The production manager realized that adding a bulge would add another cent to the production costs of Ken dolls, so they decided to save money, they would just leave it out. Wow, a whole cent. Talk about penny pinching. Ever since then, Ken has been ridiculed for not being anatomically correct, to the point where it even affected the actual Ken Handler, who was ruthlessly bullied. The situation surrounding the actual Barbie and Ken is pretty sad. Barbie felt like she was replaced by a doll, and Ken was constantly being mocked. Honestly, if you own a toy company and your children are miserable, then something's wrong. This is just sad. Anyway, back to the point. I think the whole thing regarding Ken's anatomy is pretty ridiculous and creepy and probably way overblown. Take MG Lord for example. If you saw some of my other videos on Barbie, you might recognize her as the lady from those documentaries I talked about. She wrote a book in the 90s about Barbie that garnered her a lot of respect in the community. It's called Forever Barbie, the unauthorized biography of a real doll. I've read it and I personally have a lot of issues with it, but many tend to take it as the end-all be-all.
You can absolutely absolutely tell that the creators were familiar with my book, because it is the foundational book about the origin of Barbie.
She's not exactly the nicest when it comes to these characters, like Ken and even Barbie, and she's very mean to Lily. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is where a lot of the misconceptions about her come from, but I guess that's a topic for another day. Needless to say, she has a lot to say about Ken, and it's, really something. She basically acts like practically every accessory he's ever come with is a dog whistle for a penis. Literally every accessory. They sum it up pretty well here in this article by Jezebel. Lord writes that the accessories that came with Ken's first garments sold separately from the doll came with long, thin accessories, symbols for the penis he lacked. A log stick with a skull pennant accompanied his campus hero outfit, an electric shaver with a dangling cord accompanied his bathrobe, and his weekend casuals, khakis and a t-shirt came with car keys. By 1963, 2 years after the successful launch of Ken, his phallic stand-ins had become outrageous in Lord's assessment. A rifle with a hunting outfit, a baseball bat, a pendulous stethoscope, and a long fork skewering a pink plastic weenie in the cheerful chef iteration of Ken. It seems like the Jezebel article agrees with MG Lord, that all of this was Mattel sending subliminal messages, but I can't help but feel like that's completely ridiculous. I mean, who thinks like this? Ken literally can't do anything without people thinking that it's some kind of phallic symbol. A school spirit flag? Car keys? A rifle? What? Oh, he's a doctor with a stethoscope? Obviously, this completely innocuous and totally understandable accessory to come with this kind of set must be a stand-in for the penis he's lacking. And a baseball bat coming with a baseball set? That can only be a sexual dog whistle and nothing else. He can't even have a barbecue outfit where he's just roasting some hot dogs, as if that's a weird thing to do. She also says that the message on his apron, which reads "come and get it," is a taunt about the genitals he'll never have. Or he's talking about the food, and it's a doll for little girls. So maybe you're reading a little too far into this. Pretty much all of Forever Barbie is like this. It's one of the reasons I have such a problem with this book. I just can't really take it seriously. And now all these stereotypes are coming to the forefront in pop culture, largely thanks to the movie and Ryan Gosling. But really, the movie was a parody of Barbie rather than actually being accurate to the source material, like them saying that the Kens don't have any cars or jobs, when in reality Ken does have a toy car you can buy for him, along with accessories like the car keys we talked about earlier, and he's had over 40 careers. There's also that scene where the Kens go to war, but there aren't any weapons in Barbie land, so they have to use like tennis rackets and stuff, when in reality there are weapons like swords and guns, like that rifle that came with the hunting set, but I guess the scene wouldn't have worked if they were actually shooting at each other. But pop culture really only sees Ken as Barbie's +1 and nothing more. So to the average person who doesn't really care about Barbie, like Ryan, Ken is just an accessory rather than his own character. There are many people that don't think Ken is necessary to begin with, like this article from Time magazine that says, "Ken is a piece of delicious but wholly unnecessary arm candy for Barbie, a woman who can do it all on her own." Okay, what about all the kids who were specifically asking for her to get a boyfriend? The whole reason why he was created to begin with? And besides, just because Barbie can't do it on her own, why should she have to? Why are they putting Barbie down for having a boyfriend? She can be a career woman and be in a relationship. Same with Ken, even though people pretend he never had a career. But I guess the Barbie movie is the end-all be-all of the Barbie franchise, never mind the 70 years before that. I'm also confused by all the backlash that Ken receives, considering the fact that it seems to be kind of the opposite of what other toy brands get when they use male characters. For example, back to the Jezebel article, there's a quote that says, "Mattel was careful to give him boyish, clean-cut looks and the overall non-threatening, asexual appearance of a wimpy little jerk." I'm just confused because a lot of brands targeted to boys are often accused of being violent or promoting toxic masculinity, like G.I. Joe or He-Man, but then Ken is seen as this pathetic little wimp because he's not anatomically correct. I mean, Ken is basically just a regular guy, just a cool, chill dude that little girls can imagine their dolls going on a date with, or hanging out with. He has his careers, he has hobbies, he has a loving relationship, showmanship. These are all pretty good qualities, but he sucks because he's non-threatening. But you know that if he was built like a pro wrestler and was anatomically correct, people would still complain. People are always complaining that Barbie is too sexy and scandalous. So Barbie's too sexy and Ken's not sexy enough? I just don't understand what people want. Personally, I think most of these controversies are just people reading way too into things. Like with Ken and his accessories, they're just toys made for children. Can everyone please lighten up? One last thing that I would like to point out is the fact that Ken might not be as irrelevant as people assume. Even in pop culture, Barbie is one of the most recognizable characters basically ever. Even people who aren't interested in dolls know who Barbie is. When it comes to the Barbie franchise, there are actually a lot of characters, but most people really only know Barbie and Ken. If you ask somebody who come across who Barbie's boyfriend is, they'll probably be able to answer. But if you ask that same person who Barbie's sisters are, they probably wouldn't be able to answer, let alone her friends or parents or any other character. We've seen this before. I've talked about Happy Family Midge, the pregnant Barbie doll that we saw in the movie. At the time, everyone assumed that it was Barbie who was pregnant, despite the fact that Midge has existed since the early 60s, and has been around in one form or another that entire time. And they all assumed that Mattel was promoting teenage pregnancy because Barbie is a teenager, despite the fact that Midge had been married for 10 years at that point. But no one knows Midge.
It's Midge, Mattel's marvelous new teenage doll.
Midge. Of course. Midge.
Because most people just aren't really in tune with this franchise. They just see it as either a cute or harmful kid's toy, depending on who you ask, without realizing there's any lore that goes along with it.
Does anyone know who Midge's boyfriend is? Alan!
I have never heard of Alan in my life.
The truth is, Barbie is the face of the brand. She's the main character, the queen bee, the it girl. She's the one that really matters, and the one that most people latch onto, even if they aren't actually into the franchise. So the fact that Ken is even known and stands out as much as he does, for better or for worse, really says a lot. They may not like Ken, but they know Ken. I bet they don't know Blaine. Take that, Blaine. I hate Blaine. The point is, as far as people are concerned, all the dolls are either Barbie dolls or Ken dolls, and there's no other characters. And frankly, everyone's just being really mean. Seriously, what is this with all the weird, like, everything's a phallic symbol? Are you kidding me? That's just so messed up. But that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you think Ryan has a point at all? Or do you think people are unnecessarily mean to Ken? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Sorry I got a little heated in this video. I usually try to keep a level head, but some of the content was just a lot. But thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to the channel members: Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Hussyman42, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Takari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Garcia XV Legend, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Spam, Soundboy00, Kitsune Fiora, Lucas Geist, Jay Draws, Blue Spirit, Bandito Bane, Meowzers, Sky, Jin KZ, Philip, Stutania, Isaac Martinez, and Data Dine Executive. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. If you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support the channel that way. And if you enjoyed this content, I'd appreciate it if you left a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and that part's free. Thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.